Women's Soccer Review Podcast with Dwayne Rollins and Jonathan Tannenwald on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network. I'm Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Solo again. I promised Dwayne and Kevin will be back soon. But then again, we aren't going to be doing that many more shows during the NWSL Challenge Cup on the fly. In fact, technically and officially, this is the last one during the tournament as we preview the final. And we do so with a very good friend of mine. We've gone all over the place on this show to, as I've said before, all over the U.S., all over the world. Time to go to my neck of the woods. Even more of a Philadelphian than I am because I'm not actually from here. And Marissa Pilla is from Bucks County. And
yes.
We've now lives in the city, if I'm not mistaken.
I do, yes.
Although at the moment, she is, of course, out in suburban Salt Lake City as the sideline reporter for CBS, where she's been doing a terrific job. And I know Marissa for a whole bunch of things, as I'm sure some of you do too. She's appeared nationally on NWSL and MLS games. She's the studio host for Philadelphia Union MLS local broadcasts here in Philadelphia. She does a lot of college basketball around here too. So we cross paths all the time. And Marissa, it's great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to talk to someone outside the bubble for a little bit. Thank you. And
for me, having been isolated at home, because there's nothing else to do, it's been a while since I've heard an honest-to-goodness Philly accent in my headphones. So
I'm glad I could provide that for you, Jonathan.
How is it out there, first of all?
It's good. I am kind of in an apartment complex right across the street from Zions Bank Stadium. So that's where they've been housing myself and members of the league. And some of the moms were staying out here, too, with their children. So where I am, it's nice. I have my own apartment. Like you said, it's suburban Salt Lake. A lot of new construction around here. So not a ton to do, but we're not really supposed to be doing anything anyway. So there's not really a lot of temptation either.
Do you have any interaction, with players and coaches and such outside of the stadium? Because I know the teams don't really cross paths, right?
Right. Yeah. From my understanding, the teams were in separate hotels and they would see each other, but not really be able to interact. The only times I've been to a team hotel is when they invited us. Like I sat down with Jess Fishlock of OL Reign, and they invited us to come. So it was kind of like a controlled environment. We were in their game room, and we did a sit-down interview there. So we also try to give them their space, too, because we know it's stressful to be in a tournament, and, those interactions off of the field, that's their time to kind of regroup and be with themselves, with their teammates, their coaches. So not a ton of interaction off game days, but over the phone, I've been talking to a lot of people.
And how big is the production staff out there?
It's pretty big, but most people are in Florida working out of Vista there. So my producer, my director, I only can communicate with them, through my headset, over the phone. So it's a little different than being on location for, MLS on FS1 game, or when we were with ESPN last season where everybody's together in the truck. But with the people I do have here, they've been really great, really hands-on, and it doesn't feel like we're so far away because we talk all the time, but it is a little different.
And for those who don't know, I will quickly throw in a shout out to your former MLS on Fox producer, Shaw Brown,
yes,
who was unceremoniously and, in my opinion, a very bad move by Fox, laid off as a cost-cutting measure a couple of weeks ago. If he's listening, know that we are all rooting for somebody to get Shaw back into this business as fast as possible.
For sure, yeah.
Let's review the semifinals and then look ahead to the final, and we will go in order as we always do, which means we start with Houston beating Portland. And I, on Soccer Today, in the hours before the game, said Portland was the favorite to win the whole thing, and so much for me.
I feel like that's been happening a lot during the tournament. Just because, too, North Carolina got defeated in the first round in the quarterfinals, and I don't think anybody really saw that coming, but that also speaks to Portland being able to turn it on when it was necessary in the quarterfinals. But with this first game, a lot of us were saying, I really don't know how this is going to go because Portland has such a top to bottom really solid team, and Houston has such a solid attack. So we're like, how is this going to work out? Like, who's going to get the edge? But Houston I love the energy that they've come out with. It's all led by Rachel Daly, the intensity she brings onto the field, and her teammates follow suit. And it's just been really exciting to watch this team kind of put their money where their mouth is. Like, hey, we want to be different this year. We want to prove people wrong. And they're doing it in games when it actually matters. Because you can say you want to be different, and you can say, it's not the same old thing as it has been with this club, but not get the results. And they've been able to back it up with results. So Houston's been very, very exciting.
And Portland, and I got in some trouble with Thorns fans when I said this on Twitter, which is nothing new for me, as folks know. We do not often see the Thorns approach a season, a campaign, certainly a playoff style structure where there's a trophy on the line, with a long-term thinking plan where it doesn't actually matter as much to them if they win the thing as if they develop their young players and think long-term. And I went back and forth with Mark Parsons about this a little bit, and I have for a few days. I'm not saying he's wrong. I've never said he's wrong. I just feel like, the exact phrase that I'm pulling up the exact phrase that he offered. This was right after the North Carolina game. He said a bigger purpose was driving us in that win. And when the Thorns lost to Houston, I wrote on Twitter, I ended up deleting the tweet because it came across as a little bit of a cheap shot, that when you go with rhetoric, really lofty rhetoric after a big win, and then you lose the next game, it might come back to bite you. Now, I should have said in the initial tweet exactly what I was referring to about, the bigger purpose stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not used to the Thorns doing that, and they're not wrong, but it's still the notion that they're as satisfied as they are with what they saw struck me. Did it strike you?
I'm not sure. I think when we first talked to Mark Parsons heading into the tournament, he talked so much about, and the team did too throughout the tournament, about just how different the energy was around the team. And he said, last year we looked like individuals at certain times, and this year we feel more like a team. And Megan Klingenberg explained to me too that, because they were having all these very serious and much needed discussions off the field of Black Lives Matter and pride and all these big important discussions, it was able to bring this team closer. So then they could kind of then focus on that common goal on the field. And I think he did want to kind of look ahead to the future and say, okay, we're going to do as well as we can in this tournament, but it isn't the end of the road for us. And I think a lot of coaches are looking at that too, because we're not sure exactly if we're going to have soccer after this, if we're going to have NWSL soccer. So this is kind of your moment to do as well as you can right now, but also look ahead to the future in the same time. And, they also experienced some injuries throughout the tournament that I think tweaks some things for them. But all in all, I think Portland, they were the last seed, but that I don't think it really meant much to them other than, we're better than what that seeding means. And I think they played really well throughout the tournament. And just in that last game, it didn't quite look like it was connecting.
They were obviously missing a ton of players. And they blew the team up in the offseason. You talked about the cultural stuff. Mark Parsons has alluded to this repeatedly, and he's never quite come out and said it, but it's sort of obvious on the face of it. They blew the team up in the offseason. And, I think they're going to be a lot better by next year, when everybody's playing.
Right.
even if they just had Sophia Smith if she wasn't injured.
Right. I think that too, a big part of it, because not that they put all their eggs in that basket. Like, they have a lot of great, amazing players. I mean, you look at their roster and there's tons of talent, but I think they thought, like, okay, we can really build around that. And heading into the draft, that was something he really talked about, was building around somebody who could be the future of the national team, and having that cornerstone as someone to develop. And it was heartbreaking for them not to be able to have her with them, because it was a good opportunity to get her minutes and to get her a taste of what the league is like. So I think that was hard. And, losing Becky throughout the tournament, and then, Bella Bixby showed up huge in net, and then Britt Eckerstrom came up even bigger at coming in on the third on the depth chart. So I think they showed a lot of resiliency in terms of the pieces that were available to them. And I just don't think it was exactly how they had imagined the tournament going. But I think they showed a lot about themselves, and that, they did make a lot of changes in the offseason, but it's starting to show who they want to start to develop into.
And as I said, I think they're going to get there. But I'm going to be very interested to see, what expansion does. This is a team, certainly. I mean, all the teams, but this one for sure. What expansion does to this group. And, I'll mention this here briefly, even though it's still very nebulous. Lisa Baird had a conference call with reporters on Friday. And she mentioned finally, for the first time on the record, that the league now wants to play more games this year. They don't know yet how they're going to do it exactly. But I asked her, are you going to let anybody opt out again who wants to? And she didn't quite get there. I mean, she didn't know yet. They don't know yet. And I don't think they've gotten that far yet with either the NWSL Players Association or the U.S. Women's Teams Players Association. But, and again, anybody who had the right to opt out of this thing had a right to.
Right.
No repercussions, no judgments, nothing. But Tobin Heath was one of the players. There's no way around that. And there's no way around the fact that the Thorns could have used somebody like that. And if they do play games again this year, who knows what's going to happen, with opt-outs then. And I don't want to get you in too much hot water, Marissa, because you're working for the league, but that's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, because a Thorns team playing more games this year with some of the players that they were missing is much more the Thorns team that we're used to.
Well, yeah, and like you said, I think it was definitely their prerogative not to play in the tournament. And I think what has kind of been shown throughout this pandemic is people handle all of this in such different ways, and you can't, judge somebody on what makes them feel safe and comfortable, because no one really knows how to navigate this situation. And it's kind of like you have to give people, their space to figure it out on their own. And the players who opted out, like, I completely respect that they put their safety and their mental health first. And I get that completely, because, it's difficult, trying to navigate these uncharted waters. So I'm not sure if there is going to be that opt-out option. I think it was great that the league was able to do that for players, to tell them there's no repercussions if you don't want to play. And I think that was amazing, because we've seen that that's not always the case with different leagues. And I think that was a huge victory for the league to be able to give those players that option to make the call for whatever worked for themselves.
Let's go to the other to the other semifinal. Just Sky Blue Chicago, and Chicago just came blasting out of the gates. I think we probably all figured that was going to do it, especially when they scored that third goal. But Sky Blue, to its great credit, did not give up, got back to 3-2, could have made it 3-3, didn't get there. But I think sent a very, and I wrote this obviously, this week in the Inquirer, that sent a very big message about their potential. And speaking of players that weren't in the Challenge Cup, now you look at what they did. You look at Freya Coom's tactical setup, which a lot of people don't like it. And I get why people don't like it. I'm not saying anybody's wrong, but she has a right to let her team play it and see if it works. And it worked in that semifinal pretty well, even if it means Margaret Purse playing right back. And now you start to imagine Carly Lloyd at the 9 and Mallory Pugh on the right wing. And that team starts to look really good.
It's very exciting to see what they've been able to do. And I've talked to a lot of different players on Sky Blue throughout the tournament, and everybody just kind of said the same thing about it's so refreshing to have Freya Coombe at the helm, because she just allows you to play with so much freedom. And, from goalkeepers to center backs to forwards, midfielders, they all feel like in that moment they can solve a problem on the field as they see fit, and they don't have to constantly think of what am I supposed to do. It's more so what feels right in this moment, and she really encourages that freedom, and you could see that it helps these players shine in what they're really, really good at. I talked to Estelle Johnson about that, and she said, I feel like I'm a kid again playing at the park, like I'm just playing to play, and I'm able to do things with a sense of freedom. And Kaylin Sheridan said, I'm able to play out of the back because I trust my own feet, and my teammates now trust me too. And they have all these options now that's come from Freya Coombe's vision. And it was just such a fun team to watch really blossom throughout the tournament. McCall Zerboni played a huge role in really kind of being that moral leader, and we all kind of knew she would be joining this team, but she's always fun to watch kind of build her team up. And I love Midge Purse as an outside back. I think, she really had some moments of brilliance out there. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this continues, because as you said, they were missing some pieces. And if you could see how well they played without them, your natural thought is, wow, can you imagine when you finally get all these pieces back and how they start to gel and be able to play off one another? And I'm excited to watch them develop for sure.
I don't know when they're next going to play. And, obviously there was so much anticipation with them because they were going to go into Red Bull Arena this year.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so on. And where we are in this part of the country, Commissioner Baird talked about, we're going to work with the state and local leadership and so on. I don't think it's going to be this part of the country, because unless they're going to play at Lincoln Financial Field and stay in the Navy Yard, there's not really anywhere in Washington or New York or New Jersey where it's going to be really easy to stash 5 teams. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how, logistically everyone figures this out, and not even just NWSL, but what happens with MLS after the tournament and everything. And I'm interested to just see what happens, and I'm kind of glad I'm not in charge of organizing it, because it seems like such a headache. So I'm just going to sit back and wait until somebody tells me this is where the game is, you have to be there, and I'll be there.
I'll tell you what, I don't blame you. And I, even just watching baseball on Thursday night with what they're trying to do, and this is for another show down the road, but I don't see how you can have teams traveling around the country right now. I just don't. And hopefully it gets better soon, but I think people know, you know, especially Marissa, because you and I run into each other so much, and I think a lot of the listeners know how cynical I am about a lot of that stuff. With Chicago, I want to talk about Savannah McCaskill first, and not just because I pegged her at the start of the tournament as a player who I really wanted to watch and wanted to see take this thing by the scruff of the neck and make it hers, because she came so close to, fulfilling her potential with the national team in past years and hasn't quite gotten all the way there. But that third goal that Chicago scored, that's the Savannah McCaskill we all want to see, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, her vision on that play was just amazing. You know, she was able to create a turnover, and she just drove right at them. And she told me afterwards, you know, she saw the numbers up situation, and she has the confidence in herself on the ball to just drive at defenders. And that's what makes her so good, because when she's going full speed, she's a presence out there. And she had the vision too to see Bianca St. George is out on the side and then get into space to receive that kind of give and go right in the top of the box. And watching her play that way is just, as you said, like what you want to see out of Savannah McCaskill, because she's so incredibly talented. And I talked to her at the beginning of the tournament, and she said, you know, like, obviously our attack looks different this year. You know, we don't have Sam Kerr anymore, and we have to play differently because we don't have her. And she said she's excited, though, because she gets to kind of link up with these players a little bit more. And she was excited to build that relationship with Kalia Watt a little bit more and understand how she likes to play. And, you know, before Yuki got hurt, having Yuki as somebody to bounce passes and through balls through. And I think she enjoys having that freedom on the ball a little bit more. And it's been really cool to watch her, as you said, just take this tournament as a huge opportunity. I love watching her play. I think she's so tenacious and she's so strong, and she is so competitive, and one of those players that you're like, I would want her on my team, because she does not give up. Like, her work rate is unbelievable, and she really gives it all when she's out there. And I don't know how, because she is working so incredibly hard, but she's someone too. I think this matchup between Chicago and Houston is going to prove to have really two aggressive sides. You know, you got Rachel Daly on one side, who's really leading this charge with Houston and wanting to make a mark for this team. And then you've got, you know, Savannah McCaskill, Julie Ertz, like all these really strong players on Chicago. And I think it's going to make for a great final.
I'm inclined to believe that Chicago is the favorite. I'm not sure yet that they have solved all of their attacking issues when the goals came chiefly from Bianca St. George's, who's not exactly a striker.
Right.
But I'm inclined to think they're the favorite. And I suppose the biggest caveat to that is how badly are Yuki Nagasato and Tierna Davidson injured? Have you got any sense of where they are at this point?
You know, I haven't, and I'm interested to see if their status gets upgraded as the days go by, because they have had some more time to rest. But I couldn't tell you. I really don't know. But certainly when Tierna Davidson comes back in, that frees up a lot defensively for Chicago. That allows Julie Ertz to get higher on the field, become more involved, you know, in the midfield and creating chances. If Yuki's out there, she's an assist machine on top of being just one of the nicest and coolest players I've ever met. She's just, you know, a magician out there. So it definitely gives them different looks. But I honestly have no idea if that they're going to be options for them. But if they are, it could be maybe an X factor in the final game.
And lastly, I think, in terms of the questions that I have, how different is, you know, working in Rio Tinto Stadium versus working in Zions Bank Stadium, aside from the blindingly obvious one of the grass versus the turf?
Well, you know what? It's interesting. It was like, we had been so used to Zions Bank because that's where we played the majority of the games. And then on semifinal day, when I walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in an MLS NWSL stadium. You know, you got that feeling. It's obviously much bigger. It's my first time being in this stadium, so I really wasn't familiar with it, but it's a great facility. The grass is amazing. I think I saw a plaque hanging in the stadium that they won like 2019 Sports Field Management of the Year or something. So they take the grass there very seriously. And two, I think a big thing is, you know, the sun and how this stadium was built in differently than how Zion's Bank was. So we saw at Zion's Bank at the start of that night game, the sun was kind of directly glaring into the TV screen. And this stadium, Rio Tinto, is built kind of the opposite way. So we don't have that same effect. Of course, that won't play really much of a role on Sunday, but on Wednesday night in that night game, it was a little different. But it just also has that feeling of like, it's where the NWSL plays, it's where MLS plays, and you kind of get that feeling of grandeur when you're in it too. And it's a great stadium, so I'm happy we're there for the finals and the semifinals.
Well, this has been a terrific conversation, as always. People think that this was great because we just talked about the NWSL for half an hour. Okay, go find us. If we ever actually get back to the Palestra again, go find us in the press dining room down there, just shooting the breeze for half an hour and confusing the daylights out of all the college basketball people in the room, some of whom I've known for a long time, admittedly, but they aren't soccer fans, all of them.
No.
And
I hope to be back at the Palestra soon. I love it there.
It is, and I don't think I've mentioned it yet on this show because Dwayne and Kevin, for completely understandable reasons, would have no idea what I'm talking about. It is my favorite sports venue anywhere of any kind. Obviously, I'm biased because I went to school there.
A little biased, yeah.
But anybody who sets foot in the place, I mean, it's just, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
The closest soccer venue experience to it in North America, I think, is Providence Park.
Yes. Providence Park it's magic there. The fans, everything, they just make it so incredible. And there's just such a great atmosphere out there. And I always love going to games out there. Well, this has been, as I said, this has been great. Marissa, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Have a great time on Sunday in the final, and most importantly, get home safely.
Thank you so much.
For Marissa Pilla of CBS, right? I could say a whole lot of things.
I'm everywhere, yeah.
For Marissa Pilla and, of course, for Kevin and Dwayne, this is Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network.